3 months ago, my parents handed me a house so rot-infested the wind whistled through the walls, while my sister received a luxury apartment downtown. I took the rusted key without a fight and spent every waking hour rebuilding those ruins, but just as the house began to breathe again, my mother called with a chilling demand that the property now belonged to my sister. She has no idea the land was never hers to give. My name is Aria Crawford. I am 33 years old. If you asked anyone who knows me to describe my character in 3 words, they would likely say I am independent, practical, and terrifyingly stubborn. I do not start fires, but if you burn me, I will not just survive the ash, I will build a fortress out of it. I have never been the type of woman to scream in a crowded room or throw wine in a face during a heated argument. Silence has always been my weapon of choice. It is cleaner, it leaves no evidence, and in my family, silence is the only shield I have ever had. The night my life changed began with a roast chicken dinner and a bottle of Merlot that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My parents, Robert and Elise, had summoned my younger sister, Brielle, and me to the family home for a special announcement. The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of rosemary and performative generosity. "We want to give you both a head start," my father said, wiping the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. "We have come into some liquidity, and we decided it was time to settle our assets." He placed 2 envelopes on the polished mahogany table. One was thick, creamy, and heavy, the kind of stationery used for wedding invitations or legal victories. The other was a standard, thin white envelope, the sort you use to mail a check for the water bill. Brielle reached for the thick one. Of course she did. She tore it open, her manicured nails flashing under the chandelier light. A set of heavy silver keys slid out, along with a thick stack of documents. "Oh my God!" she shrieked. "Is this the place on 5th? "The penthouse suite," my mother beamed, clapping her hands together. "Fully paid lease for 5 years, with an option to buy. We know how important image is for your lifestyle blog. Honey, you need an address that matches your potential." Brielle was jumping up and down, hugging them, tears streaming down her face. It was a scene straight out of a Hallmark movie. Then, the room went quiet. All eyes turned to me. I picked up the thin white envelope. It felt light, almost empty. Inside, there was no stack of legal papers. There was just a single, rusted brass key and a 3x5 index card with an address scrawled on it in my father's jagged handwriting. 1402 Oak Creek Lane, I read aloud. The address was unfamiliar, somewhere way out past the city limits, where the paved roads turned to gravel. "It is a project," my father said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the warmth he had just showered on Brielle. "It is an old property we acquired years ago. It needs some love, but you know how you are, Aria. You are good with your hands. You fit with the fixing sort of work." The implication hung in the air like stale smoke. Brielle was the art. I was the labor. Brielle was the penthouse. I was the project. I looked at the rusty key in my palm. It left a faint orange stain on my skin. I could have thrown it back at them. I could have asked why Brielle, who is 26 and has never held a job for longer than 6 months, deserved a palace while I was being handed a ruin. But I knew the answer. I was the sturdy one, the one who did not need help, the one they could shortchange because I would figure it out anyway. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. I did not smile. I finished my dinner. I watched them toast to Brielle's future. I listened to them discuss furniture shopping for the penthouse. When the clock struck 9, I stood up, took my purse, and walked out. I did not slam the door. The drive to Oak Creek Lane took 45 minutes. As the city lights faded in my rearview mirror, the road grew darker and narrower. When the GPS finally announced I had arrived, I thought there was a mistake. The headlights of my sedan cut through the darkness to reveal a structure that could barely be called a house. It was a 2-story Victorian that looked like it had been screaming for mercy for 20 years. The front porch sagged in the middle like a broken spine. The paint, once white, was now a peeling gray scab. One of the upstairs windows was boarded up with plywood that had rotted through. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. I walked up the path, kicking aside knee-high weeds that grasped at my jeans. When I put the key in the lock, it stuck. I had to jiggle it, use my shoulder, and force the wood to give way. The door groaned open. I shined my phone's flashlight into the abyss. The floorboards were warped. I could hear the distinct drip, drip, drip of a leak somewhere deep in the belly of the house. It was not a gift. It was a burden. It was a place you sent things to die. I stepped back out onto the porch, needing fresh air. That was when I saw her. A woman was standing on the other side of the overgrown hedge that separated the property from the neighbor's lot. She was elderly, perhaps in her late 70s, wearing a heavy wool cardigan despite the humid night. She was watching me with eyes that reflected the moonlight. "Good evening," I said, startled. "You are the Crawford girl?" she asked. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "Yes, Aria. My parents gave me this place." The woman, Mrs. Della Hart, as I would later learn, tilted her head. She looked at the rotting house, then back at me. There was no pity in her gaze, only a sharp, calculating curiosity. "Gave it to you, did they?" she murmured. She leaned closer to the fence. "Funny thing about this land, I have lived next door for 50 years, and I remember a different name attached to this dirt, a very different name." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping closer. "Just that memory is a tricky thing," she said, pulling her cardigan tighter. "Especially in your family." She turned and walked back toward her own small, well-kept cottage, leaving me standing in the dark with a rusted key and a warning I did not yet understand. I looked back at the house. My father thought this was a joke. He thought I would take one look at this money pit, sell it for scraps, and come crawling back to ask for help, proving that I was just as dependent as Brielle. He wanted to break my pride with dry rot and termites. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. It was the same feeling I got right before a long run or a difficult negotiation. I would not sell it. I would not ask for a dime. I would fix every inch of this place. I would sand the floors until they gleamed. I would replace the pipes. I would paint the walls. I would turn this insult into a fortress so beautiful it would make their penthouse look like a plastic toy. I took my phone out. I stepped back to the edge of the road to get the full frame. I snapped a photo of the house in all its dilapidated misery. Then, I drove to the nearest 24-hour gas station, bought a notebook and a pen, and taped the receipt for the gas to the first page. I did not know why I did it. It was just an instinct, a vibration in my gut that said, "Keep the receipts, document everything." Because if there is one thing I have learned from 33 years of being the strong one, it is that when people give you nothing, you have to prove you built everything. I was going to build, and I had a feeling I would need every single piece of paper to prove it was mine. The morning after I decided to keep the house, I sat on an overturned joint compound bucket in the middle of the living room and opened my laptop. The spreadsheet I created was a sea of red numbers. I had called 3 contractors for quotes on the roof, the plumbing, and the electrical work. The lowest bid was $40,000. That was $40,000 I did not have. I had my savings, which amounted to about $8,000, and a credit card with a $5,000 limit. That was it. I closed the laptop. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the scratching of a squirrel in the attic. I realized then that I could not buy my way out of this hole. I had to work my way out. The next 6 weeks became a blur of physical exhaustion and grit. I stopped being Aria Crawford, the daughter who sat quietly at dinner parties, and became a creature of dust and utility. I started with the floors. The carpet was a shag nightmare from the 70s that smelled of wet dog and ancient cigarettes. I sliced it into strips with a utility knife, my hands cramping as I rolled the sodden material and hauled it to the curb. Beneath the carpet, the subfloor was rotted through in 3 places. I learned to use a circular saw by watching videos on my phone, propped up against a thermos of coffee. I cut out the cancer of the wood, measured fresh plywood, and drilled it down. The sound of the screw gun became the soundtrack of my life. I wore a respirator mask so often that it left permanent red indentations on my cheeks. I tackled the mold in the bathroom next. It was black and slick, coating the drywall like a disease. I suited up in a white Tyvek suit and scrubbed with bleach until my eyes watered and my throat burned. I tore down the drywall, exposing the skeleton of the house. It was brutal work. I broke fingernails. I got splinters that went deep into the meat of my palm. I bruised my shins on exposed beams. But every time I swung a hammer, I felt a strange, vicious satisfaction. I was not just fixing a house, I was erasing the neglect, to pay for the materials. I could not rely on my day job alone. I started taking commissions for furniture restoration in the evenings. I would work on the house until the sun went down, and then, under the harsh glare of a portable work light, I would sand down antique dressers and refinish dining chairs for clients I found online. My hands were perpetually stained with walnut stain and paint thinner. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate sandwiches while driving to the hardware store. Mrs. Della Hart became my lifeline during those weeks. She never intruded, but she was always there. One afternoon, when the temperature spiked to 90 degrees, and I was wrestling with a sheet of drywall that refused to line up, I heard a throat clear from the fence line. I walked out, covered in white dust, sweat making tracks through the grime on my face. Della was holding a tray with a pitcher of iced tea and a plate of cold ham biscuits. "You are going to drop dead if you do not eat," she said, her voice dry as kindling. I took the tray, my hands shaking from fatigue. "Thank you, Mrs. Hart." "Della," she corrected. "And do not thank me. I just do not want to smell a rotting corpse next door in this heat." She stayed for a moment while I drank the tea. It was sweet and cold, and tasted like salvation. "You are doing good work," she said, looking at the pile of debris I had hauled out. "Better than the last owner. He never touched a thing." "Who was the last owner?" I asked. "A holding company," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Faceless, but before them well. That is history." A few days later, while clearing the overgrown brush in the backyard to make room for a dumpster, my shovel hit something hard. It was not a rock. I knelt and brushed away the dirt. It was an old survey stake, made of iron, deeply embedded in the ground. A few feet away, I found another one, and then a third. They were old, much older than the house itself seemed to warrant. Most lots in this area were marked with simple wooden pegs or modern plastic flags. But these were heavy, permanent markers. It suggested that this land had been measured with extreme precision a long time ago, as if the exact square footage mattered more here than anywhere else. I took a picture of the markers, a strange feeling prickling the back of my neck, but I had no time to dwell on it. I had a house to save. Then, my father visited. I was on a ladder, painting the exterior trim a crisp, clean white, covering the peeling gray. I heard his luxury sedan crunch over the gravel driveway. He stepped out, wearing a suit that cost more than my entire renovation budget. He did not look at me. He looked at the house. He walked around the perimeter, his hands clasped behind his back. He inspected the new porch railing I had installed. He kicked the tire of the dumpster. He looked at the fresh paint. "You have been busy," he said. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. "I am making it livable," I said. Climbing down the ladder, I wiped my hands on my jeans, suddenly conscious of how dirty I looked compared to his pristine appearance. "It is improving," he said. He looked up at the roof I had patched. "The market value out here is creeping up. If you get the interior done to a modern standard, the equity could be significant." He looked at me then, but he did not see his daughter. I saw it in his eyes. He saw a contractor he did not have to pay. He saw an asset appreciating in value. He did not ask how my back felt. He did not ask if I was sleeping. He was appraising the property, calculating the return on investment of his gift. "Keep at it," he said, turning back to his car. "Do not cut corners on the finishings. Cheap fixtures ruin the valuation." He drove away without saying goodbye. I stood in the driveway, the white paint drying on my hands, and felt a cold clarity wash over me. To them, I was not a person, I was a mechanism for increasing their net worth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Brielle. She had sent a photo of herself drinking a mimosa on a balcony overlooking the city skyline. "Hope you are having fun playing with your little tools." The text read, "It must be so quiet out there. I do not know how you do it. I would die of boredom." I did not reply. Instead, I went back inside. I took a photo of the living room. It was not finished, but the floors were stripped and stained a rich, warm oak. The walls were a soft, creamy white. The sunlight was pouring through the clean windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked like a home. It looked like my home. I posted the photo to a renovation forum I had been lurking on. I captioned it simply, "6 weeks of sweat, from ruin to potential, within an hour." The comments started rolling in. Strangers from all over the world. "Incredible work. You have saved that house's soul. I can feel the love you put into this." I read every single one. I sat on my floor, surrounded by tools and sawdust, and felt a warmth that my family had never given me. I had built this, and for the first time in my life, the applause was for me, not for the daughter they wanted me to be. I had to drive back into the city to return a wallpaper steamer I had borrowed from Brielle's storage room, a room she had filled with hobbies she started and abandoned within a week. I had texted her 3 times to say I was coming, but she had not replied. When the elevator doors slid open on her floor, I was immediately greeted by a blockade of cardboard. The hallway outside her door looked less like the entrance to a luxury penthouse and more like the loading dock of a high-end department store. There were stacks of boxes from designers whose names I could not even pronounce, let alone afford. I stepped over a package from a boutique in Milan and knocked on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. That was when I heard her voice. It was muffled by the heavy oak door, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the high, thin pitch Brielle used when she was cornered. "I need more time," she was saying. "You cannot call him. If you call my father, he will cut me off." I froze. My hand hovered over the wood. "I will get the money," Brielle hissed. "Just give me another week. I have assets. I have prospects." There was a pause, then a sound of frustration. Something shattering. Maybe a glass or a phone being thrown against a wall. Then silence. I stepped back. I did not want to be there. I placed the steamer on top of a box marked with a luxury shoe logo and turned back to the elevator. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs, but it was not surprise. It was a sick, heavy familiarity. As the elevator descended, my mind dragged me back to when I was 17 and Brielle was 14. She had stolen our mother's credit card and spent $2,000 on online gaming skins and clothes. When the bill came, she had looked at our father with wide, watery eyes and claimed I had used her laptop and she had forgotten to log out. I had stood there, holding my report card with straight A's, thinking facts mattered. I told them the truth. I showed them the timestamps. I showed them I was at debate practice when the purchases were made. My father had looked at me, his face hard and disappointed. "Arya," he had said, "why are you always trying to make your sister look bad? She made a mistake leaving her computer open. You are the older one. Take responsibility." I learned a lesson that day that no school could teach me. The truth is not a diamond. It is not valuable on its own. It is like a seed. It only grows if the ground it falls on is willing to accept it. My family's ground was salted earth when it came to Brielle's faults. I drove back to the house on Oak Creek Lane in silence. The city felt suffocating, a grid of noise and pretense. As soon as my tires hit the gravel of my driveway, I felt my shoulders drop. I threw myself into work. I needed to drown out the memory of Brielle's desperate voice. I focused on the kitchen. I had found a stack of subway tiles at a discount warehouse for 50 cents apiece. I mixed the mortar, the gray paste thick and gritty. I applied it to the wall. pressing each white rectangle into place with obsessive precision. Spacer in, wipe, repeat. I was building something real. Every tile I placed was a fact. Every board I nailed down was a truth that could not be twisted. I took out my ledger. It was a thick, black notebook where I recorded every cent. 3 gallons of primer, $120, box of screws, $15, labor, 6 hours tiling. I wrote it all down. If they ever asked what I did with my time, I would have the receipts. My phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating against a box of grout. It was a text from my mother. Do not pour too much money into that place. Arya, it is just a temporary fix. I frowned. A temporary fix? I had just replaced the main sewage line. You do not replace sewage lines for a temporary stay. 10 minutes later, a text from my father popped up. Remember, do not get carried away imagining it is yours. Markets change. We have to be smart about assets. I stared at the screen. The mortar was drying on my trowel. Why were they saying this now? They had given me the keys. They had told me to fix it up. Now that I was actually doing it, now that the house was starting to look like a home instead of a teardown, they were pulling on the leash. It felt like they were reminding me of my place. You are the caretaker. Arya, never the owner. I went outside to wash the tools at the garden hose. The sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the yard. Mrs. Della was there, pruning her rose bushes near the dividing fence. She paused when she saw me, her shears clicking shut. You look like you are fighting a war, girl, she said. Just tiling, I said, spraying water over my trowel. But it feels like a battle. Della walked over to the fence. She looked at the house, now sporting its new coat of white paint. And then she looked at me with that same sharp, knowing gaze she had used the first night. They keep checking on you? She asked. Just texts, I said. Reminding me not to get comfortable. My father likes to remind me it is his land. Della snorted. It was a harsh, unladylike sound. His land, she muttered. She looked left, then right, as if checking for eavesdroppers, though the only witness was a stray cat. Arya, she said, saying my name with a weight I was not used to. Are you absolutely sure he's the one on the deed? I turned off the hose. The silence in the yard was sudden and loud. What do you mean? Of course he is. He gave me the keys. He pays the property taxes, I assume. Assumptions are dangerous things, Della said. I have lived here since 1974. I saw the people who lived here before your father's company put up that sign. I saw who they talked to, and I saw who came by looking for answers after they left. Who? I asked. Not your father, she said. Go down to the county clerk's office. Arya, it costs $10 to pull a record. Cheap price for peace of mind. She turned back to her roses, ending the conversation as abruptly as she had started it. I went back inside, but the rhythm of the work was broken. I sat on the floor of the half-finished kitchen. I looked at the walls I had just tiled. Checked the records. The thought felt like treason. In my family, you did not question the narrative. Dad was the provider. Mom was the peacemaker. Brielle was the prize. I was the worker. If I went to the county clerk, I was stepping out of my role. I was accusing my father of lying without saying a word. But then I remembered Brielle's voice in the hallway. Give me more time. I remembered the texts. Do not imagine it is yours. Why were they so afraid of me settling in? Unless the ground I was standing on did not belong to them at all. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the county property search portal. The cursor blinked in the search bar. All I had to do was type the address, 1402 Oak Creek Lane. My finger hovered over the enter key. My heart was pounding again, harder than when I was at Brielle's door. If I clicked this, and I found something wrong, there was no going back. I would be pulling a thread that could unravel the entire tapestry of my family. I closed the laptop. Not tonight. I told myself it was because I was tired. But deep down, I knew it was cowardice. I wanted one more night of believing I was just fixing a house, not unearthing a grave. I showered in the newly renovated bathroom, the hot water washing away the dust, but not the dread. I crawled into the mattress on the floor. I still had not bought a bed frame. I was just drifting into a restless sleep when my phone rang. It sliced through the dark room like a siren. I fumbled for it, squinting at the screen. The time read 12:14 in the morning. It was my mother. I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "Mom, is everything okay?" "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was not the frantic tone Brielle had used. It was worse. It was cold, controlled, and terrifyingly calm. "Tomorrow. Come to the main house. It is urgent." "Can't this wait?" I asked. "I have the plumber coming at 8. "Cancel the plumber," she said. "And Arya, do not buy anything else for that house. Not another nail." The line went dead before I could ask why. I sat in the dark, the phone still pressed to my ear. And I knew, the war Della had mentioned, it had just officially begun. I did not have to wait long for the other shoe to drop. At 9 o'clock the next morning, the crunch of tires on gravel announced their arrival. I was in the living room, polishing the final coat of polyurethane on the original hardwood floors I had spent a week restoring. The smell of chemical varnish was thick in the air, sharp and stinging. But to me, it smelled like progress. The front door opened without a knock. My father walked in first, stepping onto the drying floor without hesitation. He did not look at the shine of the wood or the replaced baseboards. He looked straight at me, his face set in a grim line of paternal authority. My mother followed, clutching her purse with white knuckles, her eyes darting around the room as if sizing up a hotel suite. "Turn off the music, Arya," my father said. It was not a request. I walked over to my portable speaker and silenced it. The sudden quiet was heavy. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "What is going on?" I asked. "You said it was urgent." "It is," my mother said. Stepping forward, she reached out as if to touch my arm, then pulled back. "It is about Brielle." "Is she okay?" I asked, instinct kicking in despite everything. "She is in a difficult position." My father cut in. He planted his feet wide, claiming the space. "The situation with her apartment has become untenable. The market shifted, and there were complications with the lease. She needs to vacate immediately." I frowned. "So she is moving back home with you?" "No," my father said. He looked me dead in the eye. "She is moving here." I laughed. It was a short, dry sound that escaped before I could catch it. "Here? Dad, this place is a construction zone. I just finished the floors. There is no furniture. It is not ready for a guest." "She is not a guest. Arya," he said. His voice dropped, losing any pretense of negotiation. "She needs a home, a permanent one. We have decided that this property is the best fit for her right now. It is secluded. It is paid for. And now, thanks to you, it is livable." The air left my lungs. "What?" "We need you to be out by Sunday," he said. "That gives you 72 hours to gather your tools and personal effects. We will reimburse you for the materials you purchased. Of course, just give us the receipts." I stared at him. The room seemed to tilt. "You want me to leave? I have lived here for 2 months. I have put every dollar I have into this house. I slept on the floor. I breathed in black mold dust. I fixed the roof with my own hands." "And you did a fine job," my father said, dismissing my labor with a wave of his hand. "But let us be clear. Arya, you were working on my asset. You were improving my property. You do not own this house. You never did." "You gave me the key," I said, my voice rising. "You said it was my start." "We said it was a project," my mother interjected, her voice soft, pleading, the tone she always used to smooth over my father's brutality. "Arya, please, be reasonable. Brielle is fragile right now. She cannot handle the stress of finding a new place. You are strong. You always land on your feet. You have your apartment in the city still. Do you not?" "I sublet it," I said, my hands shaking. I sublet it because I thought I lived here. I thought this was mine. We never signed a deed transfer, my father said coldly. Legally, this is my land, my house, and I am telling you that my daughter Brielle is moving in. You are welcome to visit, of course, once she is settled. Visit. He wanted me to visit the house I had resurrected from the dead. I looked at the walls I had painted, the windows I had glazed, the floorboards that still held the vibration of my sander. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. But beneath it, there was something else, a cold, hard realization. They had not given me a house. They had given me a job. They had used me as a free contractor to renovate a property for their golden child, knowing I would pour my heart into it because I was desperate for their approval. And now that the heavy lifting was done, they were evicting the help. I did not scream. I did not throw the can of varnish at them, though my fingers twitched with the urge. I took a deep breath, inhaling the toxic fumes of the floor I had saved. I need to make a phone call, I said. Who are you calling? My father demanded. We are not done discussing the logistics. I am done, I said. I walked past them, out the front door, and into the driveway. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice before I could dial. I scrolled past my friends, past my coworkers, and found the number for Caleb Knox. Caleb was not a warm man. We had gone to college together. And while others were partying, Caleb was reading case law. He was a shark in a cheap suit, a legal consultant who specialized in property disputes and hated bullies. He answered on the second ring. Knox. Caleb, I said, my voice trembling. It is Arya. I need help. Talk to me, he said. The shift in his tone was instant. He smelled blood. I explained everything in 3 minutes. The renovation, the verbal gift, the 72-hour eviction notice. When I finished, there was a silence on the line. Then, Caleb asked the one question that made my stomach drop. Arya, do you have a piece of paper? A deed? A trust document? Anything with your name on it linked to that address? No, I whispered. It was a family agreement. My father gave me the keys. Keys are not title, Caleb said, his voice flat. If his name is on the deed, and you have no written contract for the work or the transfer, you are in a very bad spot. He can technically claim you were a tenant at will or even a trespasser if he wants to get nasty. He is kicking me out. Caleb, he wants to give it to my sister. Okay, listen to me, Caleb said. His voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. Do not leave that house. Possession is your only leverage right now. If you leave, you abandon the property. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to a reimbursement. Do not let them write you a check. If you take money, it confirms you were just a contractor. They gave me 72 hours. Stay put, Caleb commanded. I am going to look into the filings. If he owns it free and clear, we have to fight on equity, unjust enrichment. You increase the value of the home under false pretenses. But Arya, I need to know for sure who owns that dirt. Send me the address, exactly as it appears on the tax bill. 1402 Oak Creek Lane, I said. I am on it. Give me 24 hours. Lock the doors. Do not let them bully you out. I hung up. I stood in the driveway for a long moment. Looking at the house, it looked different now. It did not look like a project. It looked like a battlefield. I walked back inside. My parents were standing in the kitchen, discussing where Brielle's espresso machine would go. I am not leaving, I said. My father turned slowly. Excuse me? I am not leaving in 72 hours, I repeated, my voice steady. I live here. This is my residence. If you want to evict me, you can file the proper paperwork with the court, but I am not packing a single box. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. You are challenging me? On my own property? I am asserting my rights, I said, parroting Caleb's confidence even though I felt like vomiting. And I suggest you do not move Brielle in until this is settled legally. Legally? My mother gasped. Arya, you would sue your own family? Over a house? You would evict your own daughter? I countered. After I fixed it for you? My father stepped close to me. He was a tall man, used to intimidation. You are making a mistake, Arya. A very expensive mistake. You will leave, and you will leave with nothing if you push me. Get out, I said. It was the first time I had ever ordered my father to do anything. He looked at me as if I had grown a second head. For a second, I thought he might strike me. Instead, he sneered. You have until Sunday. After that, I am changing the locks. They left. The door slammed, shaking the frame I had just repaired. 10 minutes later, my phone began to buzz. It started with a text from my Aunt Sarah. Your mother is in tears. How could you be so selfish? Brielle has nowhere to go. Then my cousin Mike. Heard you are trying to steal the house. Classy move. Arya. Then a barrage from numbers I hadn't heard from in years. Ungrateful. Greedy. After everything they did for you, the family phone tree had been activated. My mother had spun the narrative before her car even hit the main road. In their version, I was the squatter refusing to help my destitute sister. I was the villain holding the family hostage. I sat on the floor, the phone vibrating like an angry hornet in my hand. I let it buzz. I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I walked over to the front door and threw the deadbolt. Then I went to the back door and locked it too. I was under siege. But as I looked around the empty, beautiful room I had built from dust, I realized something. They could call me names. They could threaten me. But they could not unsand these floors. They could not unpaint these walls. My sweat was in the grain of this house, and I was not going anywhere. The next morning, I did not pack a single box. Instead, I sat at my makeshift desk, a slab of plywood across 2 sawhorses, with my phone pressed to my ear and my laptop open to the county registry's website. Caleb was on the other end, his voice calm and instructional, guiding me through the digital labyrinth of public records. You need the parcel identification number, Caleb said. It is usually at the top of the tax assessment. If you do not have that, search by address, 1402 Oak Creek Lane. I typed the address. My fingers felt heavy, like I was typing a code to launch a missile. I hit enter. The screen buffered for a second, a spinning gray wheel that felt like it was mocking my heart rate. Okay, I said, squinting at the sunlight hitting the screen. I have the property card up. Scroll down to the ownership history or current owner section, Caleb instructed. Does it say Robert Crawford? I scrolled. I saw the assessment value, $120,000 prior to renovation. I saw the year built, 1924. I saw the square footage. Then I looked at the line labeled Owner of Record. I blinked. I wiped the screen with my thumb, thinking it was a smudge. Arya? Caleb asked. What does it say? It does not say Robert Crawford, I whispered. And it does not say Elise Crawford either. What does it say? Caleb's voice sharpened. It lists the owner as the Aurora Trust, I read. Established August 15th, 2001. There was a pause on the line, the kind of silence where a lawyer is thinking 3 steps ahead. A trust, Caleb said slowly. Okay, who is the trustee? Who manages it? It lists a law firm in the city as the contact, I said, clicking on the hyperlink. But the grantor? Wait. I clicked deeper into the History tab, looking at the transfer deed from 2001. The grantor was Evelyn Vance. The name hit me like a physical blow. Evelyn Vance, my great-aunt Evelyn, my grandmother's sister. Who is Evelyn Vance? Caleb asked. My aunt, I said, my voice shaking. But she died years ago. Or at least, that is what they told me. I mean, I have not seen her since I was 10. Mom and Dad always said she was sick, or confused. They said she did not want to see us because she was bitter about something. Bitter enough to put a house in a trust instead of giving it to them directly? Caleb mused. Arya, listen to me. If the house is in a trust, your father does not own it. He might be a beneficiary, or a trustee, but he does not hold the title personally. He cannot just kick you out on a whim if the trust deed does not give him sole authority. He is acting like a landlord when he might just be a squatter with a suit. So what do I do? You find out who controls that trust, Caleb said. And you find out why your father is so desperate to get you out before anyone looks too closely at the paperwork. I will pull the trust documents from the archives. You just hold the fort. I hung up, my mind reeling. A trust, established 25 years ago. Why would my father lie? Why would he say, my land, if it belonged to a legal entity named after the dawn? I needed air. I walked out to the back porch. The sun was high, baking the smell of pine and wet earth into the air. Mrs. Della was in her yard again, hanging sheets on a clothesline. The white fabric snapped in the wind like surrender flags. She saw me and walked over to the fence, a clothespin clamped in her mouth. She took it out and looked at me. You look like you saw a ghost, she said. Maybe I did, I said, leaning against the railing I had just sanded. Della, you said you remembered who owned this land. Was it Evelyn? Della's eyes lit up. Evelyn, yes, sharp woman, wore hats with pins in them. She used to come here, sit on this porch, right where you're standing, and watch the sunset. She loved this house. She called it her quiet place. My parents said she hated them, I said. They said she was difficult, Della snorted. She was difficult the way a rock is difficult if you try to kick it. She just did not like liars. I remember her telling me once, right before she stopped coming, that she was securing the future. She said your mother had sticky fingers and your father had a hollow chest. I felt a chill despite the heat. Did she ever mention me? Della looked at me closely. She mentioned a little girl who liked to draw, said she had the eye. She was always waiting for that little girl to come back, but then the parents stopped bringing her, said the girl was too busy with school. I gripped the railing. They had lied. They had told me Aunt Evelyn did not want to see me. They told me she was tired, angry, senile. They had cut the cord between us. Do you know if she is? I could not finish the sentence. Alive? Della shrugged. I have not seen an obituary, and I read the paper every day. If Evelyn Vance died, the sky would probably crack. I ran back inside. I tore through the boxes I had stacked in the corner, the few personal items I had brought with me. I found an old address book from high school, a battered thing with a leather cover. I flipped through the pages. STV. There it was. Aunt Evelyn, written in my 12-year-old handwriting, in purple gel pen. Beside it was a landline number. It had been 20 years. The number was probably disconnected. She was probably gone. My hand trembled as I typed the number into my cell phone. Speaker. I put it on the table. Ring. My heart hammered. Ring. It is going to go to voicemail, or a disconnect message. Ring. This is the Vance residence. The voice was not frail. It was not confused. It was crisp, commanding, and sounded exactly like the woman who used to read me stories about dragons and architects. I froze. I could not speak. Hello? The voice came again, sharper this time. If this is a telemarketer, I have a whistle, and I am not afraid to use it. Aunt Evelyn? I choked out. There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence. I thought she had hung up. Aria, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement. You sound exactly like your grandfather. I did not know if this number still worked, I stammered. Mom and Dad said, I know what they said, she cut in. Her voice softened, just a fraction. They said I was old and mean. They said I did not want to be bothered. Yes, I whispered. And yet, she said, I have kept this landline for 20 years, just in case you ever decided to stop listening to them and start asking questions. Tears pricked my eyes. I am in the house, on Oak Creek Lane. I fixed it, Aunt Evelyn. I fixed it up. I know, she said. I have my ways of knowing. The neighbors talk. Della talks. Della talks to you? Every Tuesday, Evelyn said. She tells me you work hard. She tells me you do not complain. She tells me you are nothing like the people who raised you. They are kicking me out, I said. the words spilling out in a rush. They gave me 72 hours. They want to give the house to Brielle. Do they now? Evelyn's voice dropped. It became dangerous. And did they happen to mention who actually holds the deed to that property? The Aurora Trust, I said. Correct, she said. And did they mention that the trust has a very specific clause regarding who is allowed to reside on the premises? No, I said. Of course they did not, she said. Because they think I am dead, or at least, they think I am too old to fight back. They think the trust is just a dormant bank account they can raid. Aunt Evelyn, I do not know what to do. I have nowhere to go. You are not going anywhere, she commanded. You stay right there, you lock the doors, and you tell your father that if he sets one foot on that porch with a moving box, he will be dealing with the executor of the Aurora Trust. And Aria? The executor is not a lawyer, it is me. You? I have been waiting for this fight for a long time, she said. I just needed a soldier on the ground, and now I have one. We talked for another 10 minutes. She gave me instructions. She told me where to look for the water shut-off if they tried to cut my utilities. She told me to take pictures of everything. When I hung up, I felt like I had just been plugged into a high-voltage socket. I was not alone. I had an army, a one-woman army with a landline and a grudge. I sat back. Exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for a decade. Then, my phone buzzed again, a text message. I braced myself for another attack from the family. I looked at the screen. It was a notification from the extended family group chat. The Crawford clan, a group I had muted years ago but never left. The message was from Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, the one who had called me selfish earlier. Sarah, Elise, honey, I just spoke to the bank manager at Chase. He is a friend of golf buddies with Jim. He says the debt collectors are looking for Brielle over that $50,000 private loan. He says they are threatening to garnish wages. Does Robert know about the gambling losses yet? We need to hide this before he finds out, or he will cut her off for real. I stared at the screen. $50,000. Gambling losses. Private loan. Sarah had meant to send that to my mother privately. She had clicked the wrong thread. The chat was silent. No one typed. No one breathed. It was there, in black and white, glowing on the screens of 20 different relatives. Brielle wasn't losing her apartment because of market shifts. She was losing it because she was drowning in debt. And my parents were trying to give her my house, my hard work, to hide her failure from the world, and possibly, to hide the extent of the rot from my father. I took a screenshot. The game had just changed. I was not just fighting for a house anymore. I was holding the match that could burn their entire lie to the ground. I sat on the floor of the living room with my phone pressed to my ear, listening to Caleb break down the strategy. The screenshot of Aunt Sarah's accidental text regarding Brielle's $50,000 gambling debt was burning a hole in my digital gallery. But Caleb was adamant that I do not use it yet. Do not send that screenshot to your father, Caleb said, his voice low and steady. Do not post it on social media. Do not even show it to your sister. If you release it now, they will spin it. They will say it is a misunderstanding, or that they are handling it privately, and you are just a vindictive sister trying to shame them. They will control the narrative. So I just sit on it? I asked, looking at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. I let them think they have won? You let them build the stage, Caleb corrected. They are constructing a story where you are the villain and Brielle is the victim in need of a home. We have to let them finish building that structure so that when we pull the pin, the whole thing collapses in public. We need witnesses, Aria, real witnesses, not just family members who will lie to protect the name. I hung up and went to work. Not on the house, but on the paper trail. I turned the dining room table into a command center. I emptied 3 shoeboxes of receipts and began to organize them chronologically. Every single nail was accounted for. June 3rd, Home Depot, $340 for lumber. June 10th, Lowe's, $89 for paint and primer. July 1st, Ace Hardware, $212 for plumbing fixtures. I taped each receipt to a sheet of white paper and scanned it. Then I pulled the most important documents from my file. The building permits. When I had started the work, my father had told me not to bother with the city, claiming it was just cosmetic. I had ignored him. I had gone down to City Hall and pulled permits for the electrical rewiring and the structural repairs on the porch. The name on the applicant line was not Robert Crawford. It was Aria Crawford. The signature at the bottom was mine. The liability waiver was signed by me. If anything went wrong in this house, the city would come for me. That responsibility was the heaviest proof of ownership I had. I spent the afternoon doing a final sweep of the property. If they were going to try to claim I had damaged the house or left it unsafe, I would give them nothing. I tightened the banister on the back deck. I installed the faceplates on the outlets in the hallway. I even mowed the lawn. The roar of the engine drowning out the anxiety humming in my chest. I was not preparing the house for my sister. I was preparing the scene of the crime. My phone rang at 4 p.m. It was Aunt Sarah. I hesitated. Sarah was the town crier of the family, a woman who traded gossip like currency. After her text blunder yesterday, I expected her to be hiding, but her name was flashing on my screen. I answered. "Hello, Aunt Sarah?" "Aria," she said, her voice breathless and hushed. "I wanted to call you before you saw it on Facebook." "Saw what?" "Your mother," Sarah whispered. "She is sending out invites, electronic ones. She is hosting a welcome home party for Brielle, tomorrow afternoon, at the house." The air left my lungs. "At my house?" "She is calling it Brielle's farmhouse warming." Sarah continued. "She has invited the whole family, the neighbors, even some of your father's business partners. She wants to make it official before you can stop it." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. It was a power move of the highest order. My mother knew I would not cause a scene in front of 30 people. She was betting on my shame. She was betting that the good daughter would quietly pack her bags and slip out the back door, rather than embarrass the family in front of strangers. They were not just kicking me out. They were erasing me. They were going to stand in the living room I had sanded, under the lights I had wired, and toast to Brielle's new beginning. "Aria?" Sarah asked. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Cold, detached, metallic. "I just thought you should know," Sarah said, sounding guilty. "I told her it was in poor taste, considering everything, but you know your mother. Once she sets a stage, the show must go on." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "I appreciate the heads up." I hung up and immediately dialed Caleb. "They are throwing a party," I said. "Tomorrow, 2:00. "Perfect," Caleb said. He did not sound surprised. "That saves us the trouble of gathering a jury. They are bringing the jury to us. I do not know if I can do it. Caleb, I do not know if I can stand there and watch them pop champagne while I pack my car." "You are not packing your car," Caleb said sharply. "You are going to be the hostess. You are going to open the door. You are going to smile. You are going to let them walk into the trap. I will be there at 2:30, and I'm bringing the heavy artillery." "You mean Evelyn?" "I mean the rightful owner," Caleb said. "Just hold the line until we get there. Do not let them see you bleed." I spent the rest of the evening in a state of icy calm. I did not cry. I did not rage. I moved through the house like a ghost. I cleaned the windows until they sparkled. I swept the porch. I wanted the house to look perfect. I wanted them to see exactly what they were trying to steal. At sunset, I went out to the back fence. Mrs. Della was sitting on her porch swing, a glass of iced tea in her hand. She watched me approach. "There is going to be a crowd tomorrow," I told her. "My mother is throwing a party. It might get loud." Della took a sip of her tea. "A party? For who? The girl who thinks a hammer is a hair accessory?" "It is a housewarming for Brielle," I said. "They are announcing that she is the new owner." Della rocked back and forth on her swing. The chains creaked in the quiet evening. "And you are just going to let them?" "No," I said. "But I'm not going to fight them with yelling. I have a lawyer coming, and someone else." Della stopped rocking. She looked at me, her eyes sharp. Is that right? I just wanted to apologize in advance for the drama, I said. If you want to close your blinds, I understand. Close my blinds? Della scoffed. Girl, I have been watching reruns of old soap operas for 10 years. You think I am going to miss the season finale happening in my own backyard? I will be right here. I will not interfere, but I will not pretend I do not see what is happening. The truth needs eyes. Arya. Thank you. Della. Give him hell, she muttered, raising her glass. I went back inside and locked the door. The house was silent. I did not turn on the lights. I sat in the middle of the living room floor, legs crossed, breathing in the smell of lemon oil and sawdust. For months, I thought I was fighting for this house because I needed a place to live. I thought I was fighting for the investment, the money, the sweat equity. But as the moon rose and cast long, blue shadows across the floorboards, I realized I was wrong. This was not about the real estate. It was not about the roof or the plumbing or the garden. They had given me a ruin because they thought that was what I deserved. They thought I was the one who could handle the broken things, the messy things, the hard things. They gave Brielle the penthouse because they thought she deserved the shine, and now that I had turned the ruin into a treasure, they wanted to take it back and give it to her, because in their minds, I was only ever meant to be the builder, never the inhabitant. I was the backstage crew, and she was the star. They were trying to define my value. They were trying to tell me that my hard work was only worth something if it served them. I closed my eyes. I felt the solid wood beneath me. I felt the cool air from the vent I had repaired. Tomorrow, they were going to walk in here and try to write the end of my story. They were going to find out that I held the pen, and I was done writing checks for people who could not afford to pay me respect. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the hours tick by on my phone, waiting for the sun to rise on the day everything would change. The invasion began at noon. I had unlocked the front door as promised, not out of submission, but out of strategic necessity. My mother swept in first, followed by a catering crew carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my first car. Within an hour, my minimalist, carefully curated living room had been transformed into a Pinterest nightmare of pastel balloons and aggressively cheerful signage. A banner strung across the fireplace, the same fireplace I had spent 3 days scrubbing soot from, read "Welcome Home." Brielle in glittering gold cursive. It was tacky. It was loud. It was everything the house was not. By 2 o'clock, the driveway was full. Cousins I had not seen since Christmas, my father's golf buddies, and a smattering of neighbors I did not know filled the space. They walked across the hardwood floors with muddy shoes, oblivious to the fact that I was the one who would have to clean it, or perhaps they thought I would not be here long enough to care. I stood in the corner near the staircase, wearing dark jeans and a black turtleneck. I looked less like a guest and more like security, or a mourner. My father spotted me. He was holding a glass of scotch, his face flushed with the pride of a man who believes he has orchestrated a perfect coup. He walked over, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. It wasn't affectionate. It was a restraint. "Everyone," he boomed, silencing the chatter near the buffet. "I want you to see Arya. She is here to support her sister during this transition, a true testament to family unity." He squeezed my shoulder, hard. The subtext was clear. Play the part, or pay the price. "She is such a good sister," a woman named Linda, one of my mother's bridge friends, cooed. "It is so noble of you to step aside for Brielle. I know she has had a rough year." "Noble," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. My mother appeared at my elbow, shoving a crystal flute of sparkling water into my hand. "Smile," she hissed through her teeth, her own smile plastered on like a decal. "You look like you are at a funeral. Stop ruining the vibe." "This is a funeral," I said quietly. "You are burying my life to save hers." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, then turned to wave at a newcomer. "Oh, Susan, so glad you could make it." Then came Brielle. She wore a white sundress that made her look innocent, fragile, like a porcelain doll that had been slightly chipped. She clung to her boyfriend's arm, looking around the room with wide, watery eyes. When she saw me, she flinched, a theatrical little jump that drew everyone's attention. "Arya," she said, her voice trembling just enough to be audible to the circle of relatives around us. "I hope you aren't mad. Mom said you agreed. She said you wanted to help me get back on my feet." The room went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me. They were waiting for the villain to lash out. They were waiting for the jealous older sister to make a scene so they could shake their heads and say, "Poor Brielle." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her performance. It wasn't fear of me. It was fear of the truth. "I want you to have exactly what you deserve. Brielle," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the anger they expected. "See?" my father announced, clapping his hands. "Love, that is what this family is about." The party resumed. The noise level rose. I retreated to the kitchen to refill my water. Needing a moment away from the suffocating perfume and hypocrisy, Brielle followed me. As soon as the swinging door closed behind her, the fragile act dropped. She leaned against the newly installed granite island, my island, and crossed her arms. Her eyes were hard. "You really did a number on this place," she said, looking around. "I hate the backsplash, though, too industrial. I'm going to rip it out next week." I didn't answer. I just watched her. "Don't look at me like that," she sneered, her voice low. "You should be thanking me. If I hadn't messed up with the apartment, you would never have had the motivation to finish this dump. I gave you a purpose, Arya. You love fixing broken things. I just gave you the biggest broken thing of all." "Is that what you think this is?" I asked. "Motivation?" "It's reality," she said, reaching for a bottle of wine on the counter. "Dad pays for everything. He owns everything. You're just the tenant he's bored with, and now he needs to bail me out. So you're out. It's just business." She poured the wine, splashing some on the counter. She didn't wipe it up. "You're not going to be happy here, Brielle," I said. "This house requires work. It requires care. You can't just exist in it." "I'll hire someone," she scoffed. "Or maybe I'll just sell it in 6 months when the market peaks. Cash out. Start over somewhere warm." She took a sip of wine, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. "Cheers, sis. Thanks for the equity." She pushed past me, back into the party, back to the applause. I stayed in the kitchen for a long minute. I stared at the splash of red wine on the white granite. I didn't wipe it up. I didn't move. A strange, cold calm settled over me. It was the calm of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. I walked back out into the living room. My father was tapping a spoon against his glass. The room hushed. He stood in front of the fireplace, under the Welcome Home banner, beaming like a king addressing his subjects. "If I could have everyone's attention," he began, his voice booming, "today is a special day. We are not just celebrating a house. We are celebrating resilience. We are celebrating the fact that when one of us falls, the others are there to catch them. We are making a sacrifice today." He nodded benevolently toward me. "To ensure that Brielle has the foundation she needs." He raised his glass. "To family, and to this property, which will always be a sanctuary for the Crawford name." "To family!" the crowd echoed. I stood silently by the front door. My hand was resting on the brass knob I had polished yesterday. My father opened his mouth to speak again, probably to announce the official handover of the keys. Knock, 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 3 sharp, deliberate raps on the heavy wood door. The sound was loud enough to cut through the murmurs. It wasn't a tentative knock. It wasn't a guest arriving late. It was the sound of authority. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a bench. My father frowned, annoyed at the interruption. "Arya, get that." Probably the caterer forgot the ice. I turned. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at Brielle. I looked at the wood of the door, knowing exactly who was on the other side. "With pleasure," I said. I turned the lock. I pulled the door open. The sunlight flooded into the entryway, blindingly bright compared to the dim, cozy interior. 2 silhouettes stood framed in the doorway. One was Caleb, holding a thick leather briefcase. His face set in a professional, predatory neutral. The other was shorter, leaning on a cane with a silver handle. She wore a vintage hat with a sharp pin, and her eyes were clearer and fiercer than anyone in that room. The chatter stopped. The glass in my father's hand lowered slowly. The end had arrived, and it hadn't come with a shout, but with a knock. Caleb Knox did not shout. He did not slam the door. He simply stepped across the threshold with the kind of terrifying calm that usually precedes a verdict. He wore a charcoal suit that looked sharp against the festive, balloon-filled backdrop of the living room, and in his left hand, he carried a thick leather portfolio. But it was the person behind him who sucked the oxygen out of the room. My great-aunt Evelyn stepped into the light. She was leaning heavily on a cane with a silver handle shaped like a hawk's head, but her spine was steel. She wore a tailored coat that smelled of lavender and mothballs, and her white hair was pinned back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked like a judge who had grown tired of the court's incompetence. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked as if he were seeing a ghost. My mother dropped her hand from a guest's arm, her face draining of color until it matched the white hydrangeas on the buffet table. "Evelyn," my father finally choked out. We thought you were—" "In a home," Evelyn finished for him. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "Or perhaps dead. I know how much easier that would have been for your financial planning. Robert—" She walked forward. The crowd of neighbors and distant cousins parted like the Red Sea. Sensing that the party was over and the trial had begun, she stopped 3 feet from my father, looking him up and down with a gaze that could strip paint. "You are throwing a party," she observed, looking at the banner that screamed, "Welcome home. Brielle." "On my property." My father straightened his posture, trying to regain the command he had held moments ago. "Now, hold on. Evelyn, this is family land. We have been managing it for years since you stepped back. I am the head of this household, and I am making decisions for the benefit of my children." "Your children," Evelyn repeated. She looked at Brielle, who was shrinking against the mantelpiece, and then she looked at me. She offered me a small, sharp nod, a salute from one soldier to another. "You think this land is yours, Robert?" she asked. It was a simple question, delivered with the weight of an executioner's axe. "Of course it is," my father blustered, though his eyes darted nervously to Caleb. "I have paid the taxes. I have maintained it." "Actually," Caleb interrupted. His voice was smooth, professional, and devoid of emotion. He walked to the dining table, pushed aside a tray of smoked salmon, and laid his leather portfolio down. "You have paid the taxes on a property you do not own. That is called a donation. Mr. Crawford, it does not grant you title." Caleb opened the portfolio. He took out a document with a blue cover and a gold seal. He placed it in the center of the table. "This is the deed of trust for the Aurora Trust. Established August 15th, 2001, Caleb announced, addressing the room as if it were a courtroom. "The sole grantor is Evelyn Vance. The trust holds the title to 1402 Oak Creek Lane in perpetuity." My father scoffed, forcing a laugh. "A trust from 25 years ago? I am the heir. Caleb, everyone knows that. When Evelyn passes, it reverts to me. Read paragraph 4. Section B," Evelyn said softly. Caleb turned the page and pointed to a block of text. "Upon the incapacitation or death of the grantor, or at the grantor's discretion, the beneficial interest and right of residency shall not pass to Robert Crawford. It shall pass to the female descendant of the Crawford line who demonstrates stewardship and care for the asset. The specific designate is listed in the attached addendum." Caleb flipped to the back of the document. He looked at my father, then at the silent, stunned guests. "The designate is Aria Crawford," Caleb read, "effective immediately upon the grantor's signature, which was updated and notarized this morning at 9 o'clock. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. She rushed forward, grabbing the edge of the table. "Evelyn, how could you? We are your family. Robert is your nephew. Why would you do this to us?" Evelyn turned to my mother. Her expression did not soften. "I did not do this to you. Elise, you did this to yourselves. I did this because for 30 years, I have watched you treat one daughter like a prize pony and the other like a plow horse. I did this because you did not do the minimum for Arya. You did not give her a home. You gave her a ruin and expected her to thank you for the privilege of fixing it for her sister." The guests began to shift. The whispers started, low and frantic. "Wait, so the house isn't Robert's?" a neighbor muttered. "They invited us to a housewarming for a house they don't own?" "This is embarrassing," someone else hissed. "Let's go." The illusion was shattering. The perfect family facade was crumbling right in front of the people they wanted to impress the most. My father stood frozen, staring at the document as if he could change the words by sheer force of will. "This is a mistake," he stammered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Arya cannot own this. She does not have the means. She is unstable. I seem to recall she is stable enough to fix the roof you ignored for a decade," Evelyn remarked, "and stable enough to increase the property value by 40% in 3 months. I would say she is the only stable thing in this room." Brielle, who had been watching the exchange with wide, terrified eyes, suddenly broke. The reality of her situation, the debt, the lies, the loss of her safety net, crashed down on her. "No!" she shrieked. It was a raw, ugly sound that made everyone flinch. "You can't do this! I need this house! You don't understand!" She ran toward the table, her hands shaking. "Daddy, do something. You promised. You said it was mine. I can't go back to the city. I need this place." Her desperation was too loud. It was too frantic for someone who supposedly just wanted a change of scenery. It was the desperation of someone running from something. My father turned slowly to look at her. The anger in his eyes was replaced by confusion. And then, suspicion. "Brielle?" he asked, his voice low. "Why are you screaming?" "I am just," Brielle stammered, realizing too late that she had said too much. "I just love it here. I want to live here." "You said you needed to vacate your apartment because of a lease issue," my father said. He was connecting the dots, slowly, painfully. "You said you wanted to move here to save money for your business. Why are you acting like you have nowhere else to go?" Brielle looked at Mom. Mom looked away, unable to hold his gaze. "Where is your apartment, Brielle?" my father asked. His voice was not loud, but it was terrifying. "Do you still have the keys?" Brielle burst into tears. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. "I lost it," she wailed. "I lost it 2 weeks ago. They evicted me." The room gasped. My father stood there, the glass of scotch still in his hand, looking from his weeping golden child to his wife, who was staring at the floor, and finally to me. I stood by the door, my hand still on the knob. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched the truth burn through the room like a wildfire. "You knew?" my father whispered to my mother. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Caleb closed the portfolio with a soft snap. "Mr. Crawford," he said, "I think it would be best if you asked your guests to leave. Arya has a lot of cleaning to do, and frankly, she has the right to decide who remains on her property." My father looked at me. For the first time in my life, he didn't look past me. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and fear. He realized that the daughter he had dismissed as a tool was the only one holding the keys to the kingdom. "Get out," I said. I didn't specify who, but everyone knew, one by one. The guests began to shuffle toward the door, avoiding eye contact with my parents, muttering apologies to me as they passed. They left their half-eaten appetizers and their warm champagne. They left the Crawford family standing in the ruins of their own ego, and in the middle of it all, Aunt Evelyn tapped her cane on the floor, once, twice, 3 times, marking the time of death of their deception. The silence that followed Brielle's admission was heavy enough to crush the floorboards I had just finished refinishing. The last of the guests were shuffling out the front door, their heads bowed, trying to make themselves invisible. Among them was Aunt Sarah, the one who had accidentally texted the group chat about Brielle's gambling debt. As she passed me, she didn't look at my face. She looked at her shoes, clutching her purse tight against her chest, as if she were afraid I might demand a toll for her exit. "You lost the apartment?" my father asked. His voice was no longer the booming baritone of the master of ceremonies. It was thin, reedy, and vibrating with a frequency of anger I had never heard directed at anyone but me. Brielle was sobbing now, ugly, gasping breaths that wrecked her carefully applied makeup. It wasn't my fault. The interest rates on the credit cards, they just kept going up, and the loan sharks, Daddy, they wouldn't stop calling. Loan sharks? My father repeated the words as if they were a foreign language. He turned slowly to my mother. "Elise, you told me it was a lease dispute. You told me the landlord was being unreasonable." My mother was trembling. She reached out to touch his arm, but he recoiled. "Robert, please, I didn't want to worry you. You have been under so much stress with the merger. I thought if we just got her settled here, we could handle the rest quietly." "Handle it quietly?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "By stealing a house? By evicting Arya? You lied to me. For months." "I did it for us," my mother cried, tears finally spilling over. She turned to me, her eyes wide and desperate. "Arya, look what you have done. You have torn this family apart. Just give her the house. Please. You are strong. You can survive anywhere. Brielle needs this. If you love us, if you love your sister, you will fix this." It was the same song she had sung my entire life. Arya is the shield. Brielle is the sword. Let Arya take the blow. But this time, I didn't step forward. I didn't offer to fix it. I didn't apologize. I simply stood there, next to the woman who had actually owned the land all along, and watched them drown in the mess they had made. "I am not the one who spent $50,000 on online casinos," I said calmly. "And I am not the one who lied to Dad about it." My father whipped his head around. "50,000?" Brielle wailed, sinking to the floor in a heap of white chiffon. "I can win it back. I just need a stake. I just need time." The relatives who had been lingering in the hallway, perhaps hoping for a reconciliation they could gossip about later, finally realized there was no redemption arc coming. Cousin Mike, who had texted me calling me a thief just yesterday, caught my eye. He turned red, mumbled something about needing to feed his dog, and practically ran out the door. The house was emptying, but the shame was filling it up. Caleb stepped forward. He didn't look at the sobbing girl on the floor or the parents imploring each other. He opened his briefcase again and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Crawford," Caleb said, "this is a formal notice of trespass. Effective immediately. You and your wife are barred from entering this property without express written invitation from the trustee or the current resident. Any attempt to enter, change locks, or harass my client will be met with a restraining order." My father looked at the paper as if it were a physical blow. He looked at Caleb, then at Aunt Evelyn, and finally, he looked at me. The shock on his face was beginning to harden into something else, indignation. He couldn't process that he was the villain, so he had to make me one. "You planned this," he spat. You knew all along about the trust. You let me humiliate myself. You let me invite my friends, my partners, just so you could stage this ambush." "I did not stage anything," I said. My voice was steady. I felt my pulse in my throat, but my hands were still. "You set the date. You sent the invitations. You printed the banner. All I did was open the door when you knocked." "You could have told me," he shouted. "You could have warned me." "Would you have listened?" I asked. "If I had come to you yesterday and said Brielle was in debt and the house wasn't yours, would you have believed me? Or would you have called me jealous? Would you have told me to stop trying to ruin your golden girl?" He opened his mouth. but closed it again. He knew the answer. We all did. "I didn't bring you down, Dad," I said softly. "I just refused to prop you up anymore." My mother was kneeling beside Brielle now, stroking her hair, whispering frantic promises that everything would be all right, that Daddy would fix it. But when she looked up at him, there was no checkbook in his hand. There was only disgust. "Get up," my father said to Brielle. His voice was cold. "Get in the car." "But my stuff," Brielle whimpered, gesturing to the boxes of designer clothes she had already started moving into the guest room upstairs. "Leave it," he commanded. "We are going. Now." "But where?" she cried. "I don't have anywhere to go." "That," he said, staring at my mother, "is something we are going to discuss at home, assuming there is still a we to discuss it." He turned and walked out the door without looking back. He didn't say goodbye to me. He didn't look at the house he had claimed was his. He walked to his car with the stiff, jerky movements of a man whose reality had just shattered. My mother lingered for a second. She looked at me, her face streaked with mascara. "I hope you are happy. Arya, you have your house, but you have lost your family." "I lost my family a long time ago," I said. "I just stopped pretending I hadn't." She flinched, then hauled Brielle to her feet. Brielle looked at me one last time. Her eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a childlike confusion. She was waiting for me to break. She was waiting for me to say, "Wait, don't go. Take the spare key." She was waiting for the sister who had covered for her since we were children. I looked at her, and I felt a pang of sadness, but it was distant, like looking at a photograph of a stranger. "Goodbye, Brielle," I said. She let out a choked sob and ran out the door. Stumbling in her high heels on the gravel driveway I had raked smooth. My mother followed. The heavy oak door swung shut, but I didn't let it latch. Caleb stepped past me and closed it firmly, throwing the deadbolt with a final metallic click. The silence that rushed back into the house was different this time. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a battlefield after the smoke clears. I looked around the room, the welcome home. Brielle banner was sagging on one side, the tape having given way. Half-empty glasses of champagne sat on my coasters. A plate of untouched crab cakes was drying out on the coffee table. Aunt Evelyn walked over to the banner. She raised her cane and hooked the tip under the gold string. With a sharp tug, she ripped it down. It fluttered to the floor, a crumpled heap of glitter and lies. "Well," she said, adjusting her hat, "that went better than I expected. Robert didn't even try to throw a punch." "He was too busy counting his losses," Caleb said, loosening his tie. "You okay, Arya?" I looked at the empty room. I looked at the floor I had sanded on my hands and knees. I looked at the walls I had painted. "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time in 33 years, I meant it. "I think," Evelyn said, poking a deflation balloon with her cane, "that we should order a pizza. I refuse to eat this fancy catering nonsense. It tastes like guilt." I laughed. It was a weak sound, but it was real. The party was over. The guests were gone. My parents' reputation was in tatters in the driveway, but the house was still standing, and so was I. That night, I did not sleep until the work was done. I did not wait for Monday morning. I did not wait for a locksmith. I drove to the 24-hour hardware store, bought 3 high-grade deadbolts, and installed them myself. The sound of the screws biting into the wood was the most satisfying conversation I had had all day. When the final lock clicked into place, it felt like I was sealing a vault. For the first time, the boundary between my world and theirs was not just emotional, it was steel. The next morning, the sun hit the front porch with a brilliance that felt like a benediction. I stepped out with my coffee, and Mrs. Della was already there, leaning over the fence with a bouquet of wildflowers from her garden. "I thought the house needed a proper housewarming gift," she said, handing me the flowers. "Not that plastic nonsense your mother strung up." "Thank you, Della," I said, burying my face in the blooms. They smelled of rain and earth. "You know," she said, looking at the newly painted siding. I have watched a lot of people walk through that front door over the last 50 years. Some walked in like they owned the place. Some walked in like they were afraid of it. You are the only one who walked in like you were part of the foundation. You belong here, Arya, more than anyone. I felt a lump in my throat. I finally feel like I do. As I walked back inside, my phone pinged with an email notification. It wasn't a family member. It was a message from an editor at a prominent architectural digest. They had seen the renovation photos I had posted on the forum. The same photos my father had sneered at. Calling them a waste of time, the subject line read, "From ruin to sanctuary. Feature story inquiry." They wanted to feature the house. They wanted to interview me about the process of restoring a hopeless property. My father had seen a teardown. The world saw a masterpiece. The irony was so rich, I could taste it. My phone rang again an hour later. This time, the caller ID showed Dad. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Then, I swiped to answer. I put it on speaker and set it on the kitchen island, continuing to wipe down the counter. Arya, his voice was tight, controlled, but shaking at the edges. We need to meet. I have spoken to our family attorney. There are grounds to contest the trust. Evelyn is 84. We can argue she was not of sound mind when she signed that addendum. We can argue undue influence. I stopped wiping the counter. I looked at the sunlight streaming through the window. Dad, I said, Aunt Evelyn can recite the entire tax code from memory. She is sharper than you, and she is certainly more honest. Do not speak to me like that, he shouted, losing his composure. I am your father. You are stealing my inheritance. I am securing my home, I corrected. And if you try to sue, Caleb will depose you. He will ask about the $50,000 debt you tried to hide. He will ask about the years of neglect on this property. He will ask why you lied about the deed for 2 decades. Do you really want that on public record? There was silence on the other end. I do not argue with yelling anymore. Dad, I said quietly, I argue with paper. If you want to talk, send a letter to my lawyer. I hung up. I did not block the number. I did not need to. He knew better than to call back. That afternoon, a small car pulled into the driveway. It was Brielle. She did not have her designer sunglasses. She did not have her entourage. She looked small, pale, and terrified. I met her on the porch. I did not invite her in. I have nowhere to go, she whispered, looking at her shoes. Mom and Dad are fighting. Dad says he's going to sell the cars. He cut up my credit cards in front of me. Arya, I need a place. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Just for a few weeks, until I get back on my feet. The old Arya would have moved over. The old Arya would have slept on the couch so Brielle could have the bed. The old Arya would have fixed it. No, I said. Brielle flinched as if I had slapped her. What? You cannot stay here, I said. Because if you stay here, you will never learn how to stand up. You have been carried your whole life, Brielle. That is why your legs are weak. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card I had written on a slip of paper. This is the number for a non-profit financial counselor. They help people restructure debt. They help you find jobs that actually pay. She stared at the paper. You're sending me to a counselor? I am giving you the only thing that can actually help you, I said. Responsibility. If you want to fix your life, you have to do the work. I cannot do the demolition for you. She took the paper. She looked at the house one last time, not with greed, but with a strange sort of resignation. She turned and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the only way she would ever survive. I spent the rest of the day purging the house. I took down every balloon. I threw away the welcome home banner. I scrubbed the floors where the muddy shoes had trod. As I was cleaning out the hall closet, moving a stack of old coats my mother had left behind years ago, I found something wedged in the back corner. It was a dusty envelope, yellowed with age. It had fallen behind the shelf, likely forgotten. I picked it up. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. To Arya, It was sealed. The postmark was from 12 years ago. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It was a birthday card from Aunt Evelyn, one that I had never received. My dearest Arya, your parents tell me you are too busy to visit, but I know that is not true. I see you. I see how you draw. I see how you build things. One day, you will need a place where you can build a life that is yours alone. When that day comes, know that I have already chosen you. This land is waiting for the builder, not the borrower. Love, Aunt Evelyn. I sank to the floor. They had hidden it. They had intercepted her letters. They had told me she didn't care, all while she was trying to give me a lifeline. They had blocked every path of love that didn't come with a condition attached. I cried then. I cried for the little girl who thought she wasn't enough. I cried for the years I spent trying to earn affection from people who were bankrupt of it. But when the tears stopped, I felt lighter. The weight was gone. I sat at my desk and wrote one final email to my parents. Subject: Moving forward. I found the letter you hid. I know everything. From this point on, I will not be attending family dinners. I will not be fixing your crises. If you want to be part of my life, you will respect my boundaries. If you cannot do that, then we are strangers. The choice is yours. I hit send. I did not wait for a reply. The sun was setting as I walked out to the front porch one last time. I carried a wooden sign I had carved myself in the workshop during the long, lonely nights of the renovation. I climbed the ladder and hung it securely on the post next to the front door. It didn't say the Crawford Estate. It didn't say Brielle's farmhouse. It simply read, Arya Crawford, Design Restoration, Est, 2026. I climbed down and looked at it. For 33 years. I thought my value depended on what I could give to others. I thought I was only worth the space I occupied if I was useful. But as I stood there, watching the golden light hit the sign, I realized the truth. I had never lacked value. I had just lacked a place where I was allowed to exist without apology. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was full of me. This wasn't a gift they had given me. This was the life I had built, board by board, truth by truth. And for the first time, the foundation was solid. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe working on your own project? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. Please do not forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit that notification bell so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it.